that's kind of what I started with. And I then, now I'm sharing my screen and it's screen 2. So if I make, can you see a different thing now, or do I need to share? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I tried to create a needs analysis, but I didn't have a lot to go with because I didn't have much access to any of the students. I'd had a sort of half-hour chat with the program leads who didn't really know why I was talking to them much either, and their head was in their sort of summer marking and research. So again, I borrowed work from other colleagues. I had 2 colleagues, Irene Addison-Child and Kat McBain, who had worked in the School of English for quite a long time. And there are sort of module crossovers between the 2 schools, particularly in medieval studies, but also disciplinary similarities in terms that, you know, everything is quite text-based. So I borrowed their needs analysis template and sort of filled it in and sort of thought about what I had available to me, what I knew, and it wasn't a lot. And you can see that there's medieval studies, there's a sort of slight panic all the way through, because I really, basically, in the first semester of medieval studies, they seem to not really do anything other than study Latin and Greek. So I was kind of like, I'm not really sure where EAP is going to come into this, because it's not. And a lot of transcription work from old, if it was in English, it was very old English, and sort of like transcribing it into, I just didn't know what to do with that at all. So I pretty much ignored it, to be honest, because I kind of thought I haven't got time to think, and they're all going to be together. So there was a lot of work around, and because I was seeing them early on, I kind of, what we've experienced previously is that students don't really engage with any work that you do around writing quite early on, because they're not being asked to write, and so they can't see the relevance. And then later they'll kind of go, oh, now I need to do this. And you say, oh, we talked about this 4 weeks ago. But because I wasn't getting to communicate with them in the first couple of weeks, I kind of needed to focus on written text, because there wasn't anything that I could do to kind of encourage them to be involved in discursive conversations. So that was a bit of an issue. It was thinking about the pedagogy of history, what they were going to be needing to do, but also I think I felt I needed to think about intercultural communication and kind of how students were going to get on together in the classroom and feel confident working with each other. Didn't know a great deal about the students. They couldn't tell me how many students were going to be arriving. They didn't know who was coming. They didn't know anything very much about it. So I decided that the assessments were still very much essay assessments. There was a new module that I kind of thought that should be where I am. It was called Communicating History, but nothing had been developed, so I couldn't see what the intention was around that. And so that was a massive frustration, because I really wanted to work with that module, and it was going to be for two of the larger programs, but I didn't know nothing I could do about it. I didn't know what they were intending to do. So there were a lot of frustrations around my needs analysis. So it kind of gave me a bit to work with, but not a lot. Now, because my next thing is hidden, because people keep coming in and out, and it's sort of, I can't get to it there. Okay, so this is what I created. Students, because they were going to be given access, they wanted me to work with them as a sort of pre-sessional 2 weeks prior to arrival. However, 2 weeks prior to arrival, if they're not already on a pre-sessional, students are either, if they're UK students, probably working, doing whatever they do in the UK before they join their postgraduate programme. I know my son's working. And if they're not in the UK, the 2 weeks prior to arrival, they're travelling, still sorting out visas, panicking, or seeing family, or also working. So I kind of thought, this isn't going to work. They don't even know that they're going to have this. They didn't have access to any of the university platforms, or I couldn't assume that they did, because some of them may have registered, but others didn't, which is why I decided to go for a Padlet. I also didn't have access to those students, so I had to rely on the student support team to send in one of their arrival welcome emails that they sort of spam students with in the couple of weeks before they arrive. And also, if you want to kind of know something about what you're going to be doing, here is a link to a Padlet, and B is going to be working with you. So this is, I spent a long time creating a beautiful Padlet with loads and loads of information, and there was I would say, little to no engagement. I think one student commented on it and I didn't get anything at all, really. So that was expected, but also, you know, you kind of hope, a little bit disappointing. I think the benefit of the Padlet was that students could revisit it throughout. So because my concern had been that I was going to do this work with them and then leave them when they suddenly decided that maybe if they got anything from me, it would be later on that they realized the benefit and I was not going to be working with them. So at least they had access to this. So in the end, my thinking around what they needed was to kind of focus on some of the writing that they might need to do so they could use this as a sort of self-access, self-study place later on. So I divided it into kind of welcoming and introductions, getting to know your school so that they could kind of almost do sort of textography, ethnography work and kind of like explore the website, look at who their tutors were going to be. And I asked them to sort of think about that and kind of find out. The School of History is split over two sort of slightly separate sites and sort of work out where they were going to be. Information kind of about the library and sort of other study skills that they tend to lose and not get access to in induction week, so that it was there for them. I started asking them to think about key concepts. Historiography was apparently a big thing in the School of History, where actually if you talk to the historians there, they don't necessarily agree around what they mean by historiography and how they approach it and how they teach it. So words and kind of concepts like that students were probably unlikely to have come across before unless they'd studied within our school as well, at sort of the undergraduate level. And then there was the learning activities. The ethics and data collection, I did get ethical approval to work with students and staff around this, and so I needed them to sort of sign some ethical approval, and I felt that I needed to let them know that I didn't actually follow through with it. I ran out of time and energy, so that's kind of irrelevant really. And then I kind of created a session for on-campus sessions so that I could flip the classroom a little bit and ask them to refer to stuff and kind of do things. And there are some comments here, and you can kind of see, so I suppose this sort of worked as a needs analysis for following years and kind of previous things, but it's not telling me anything unexpected because it was the first couple of weeks at university for them. So it was like, how do I find things? What if I don't fit in? There was a lot of stuff around belonging and not wanting to sound stupid in the things that they kind of said. Okay, so that's what I came up with. I can go back to my slides. So I'll put the slides in the chat at the end, and you should be able to, if my permissions are right, follow the links here to these kind of documents if you want to explore them in your own time later and look at them. There's a lot of videos embedded, and that might be where you don't have permission, because I think I probably need to go into each of the videos and kind of provide permission as well, but you can get a sense at least of what I did. Okay, so outcomes, reflections, little to no student engagement with online resources, the platform, communication issues, the fact that they didn't know it was available. Why would they choose to engage? They don't know what they're coming to and they don't necessarily have time. There was really high attendance on campus. I went to their first induction talk, and I introduced myself, and it was scheduled in induction week. And then the following 2 weeks, I saw them for 2 hours at a time, over twice a week, actually. All students that had arrived came in the first week. Obviously, some students are still arriving. In the second week, there was still really high attendance in the first session. They were already into their sort of semester teaching by that point. So some of them had timetable clashes, and a lot of the UK students kind of petered off. I think particularly the ones with medieval studies, because they kind of realised that what they were being asked to do was not being kind of addressed in my classroom. That was the big issue that I had with that particular programme. I think for in-sessional work, it was targeted at the wrong time of year. I think if you're only going to do short in-sessional work and not be with students every week for the whole of the 2 semesters, which for me is ideal, really it needs to be once they're moving into their, maybe at the beginning as a kind of like confidence booster. How are you going to manage in seminars and then when they're kind of coming towards their first assignment and they're really kind of worrying about what they need to do. Ideally, I think it needs to follow them every week throughout the whole year, but it definitely shouldn't be pre-sessional without them knowing that they've signed up for a pre-sessional. If the communication is there, I think it's great for them to have that sort of work with us in the couple of weeks before they arrive as a sort of, you know, preparation for, but it needs to be thought through a lot more than it was. I really felt that I needed and wanted to do the staff facing work first, but the head of school wanted all staff to be there this summer. That's not possible for various reasons. And again, it wasn't planned early enough in advance. So I didn't actually get to see them until January, when they had their sort of student education away afternoon. And I kind of went in, and it was even then it was post lunch when they'd done, it was an away day, I think, and they were sort of falling asleep, and a lot of them weren't entirely sure why I was there again. So I think a lot of the in-sessional work that we do elsewhere takes a long time to build up relationships, and me kind of going in and talking to all of them. Some of them were like, what's the point of this? What's the relevance of this? And I didn't have that relationship. And I am a former undergraduate historian, and I think I was particularly nervous about talking to historians about things like this anyway, because it kind of brought back all of that fear. But and I think the way that you talk to different disciplines about the work that they do, you kind of need to know what their way of thinking is. And I didn't want to assume that because I studied history 30 years ago, I knew what history was anymore. I've entirely forgotten, really. So I didn't really have a clear sense of their kind of epistemology and ontology in the way that they taught from looking at things I'd not had enough access. And that really is it from me. And so it's kind of coming back to the questions that I asked, and to sort of see if anybody has got other questions for me or kind of thoughts around it. It was fascinating, and I really enjoyed working with the students, and I thought it was lovely actually. And as always happens, if we manage to get L1 speakers in the classroom with us, they do always kind of say how useful it is. And it did help to build relationships, I think, with students who were working on the same program. I purposely asked them to sit in program groups rather than as a way of attempting to kind of split up the sort of linguistic split that always seems to happen when you get kind of mixed language students in the classroom. So I think there was something there, but it just didn't last for long enough. And I didn't follow up with my ethical approval kind of process of kind of investigating what students had done.